tell my brother that it was happening now and that this was it, and they were gonna kill us.
When I walked in the room, I was panicking, and I just fired every shot I had. I just fired until there was nothing left.
My brother got there first, and we just burst through the doors, and I started firing.
I was just firing as I went into the room. I just started firing.
In what direction?
In front of me.
What was in front of you?
My parents.
Hello and welcome. I'm Chris Cuomo. Tonight, how it really happened. Murder in Beverly Hills, the aftermath. In 1989, the Menendez brothers were living the American dream. Lyle, age 20, Erik, just 18 years old. But then came August 20th. These wealthy Beverly Hills boys picked up a pair of shotguns and gunned down their parents, Kitty and José Menendez.
All right, you couldn't hear me. Now can you hear me? Ugh. Now? Hello? Hello? Oh, you can hear me now. Okay. All right, so I just went through like a whole speech for no reason. All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to my channel. If you're new to my channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. And I'm sorry, I still haven't got my auto record, so I'm using my my microphone, my camera as a microphone. So I apologize if the sound isn't as good as normal. So tonight we're going to discuss the Menendez brothers. I have so many thoughts going through my head on this case. These boys have been locked up for 35 years. They deserve to be out. There's no reason why they should still be locked up. And I know some people disagree with me, but I have been finding so many different news articles. And I mean, I followed the case back then. I was a teenager, but I don't remember it. Like, I don't remember every detail. I certainly don't remember every possible, scenario. I wasn't into like the court cases then. Now, mind you, this case is what's basically started court TV. Oh, you don't know much about the case? By the end of the night, Jane, you will. You'll know a lot more about this case by the end of this. So, what I learned recently, like tonight, is that Mark Geragos is actually representing them. Everybody knows I love Mark Geragos. Mark Geragos, I don't even know why I like him so much as an attorney, because he kind of sucks. I mean, the last couple of people, he hasn't been able to get out. But I just like his swag. I like the way he talks. So he's actually representing them. And if you don't know, the Netflix documentary, The Monster Show, really wants you to think that it was TikTok that made all this happen. It was TikTok that, caused this. The reality is, there's a new law that passed a couple of years ago in California. And that law is for judges to reevaluate sentences. My personal feeling, and I have not heard this anywhere, it's not backed up anywhere, but I think this had to do with the marijuana movement, because right around the time that marijuana became recreational legal in California is all of a sudden when they made this rule. And yes, it was in front of the DA about a year ago. But I think it was when marijuana became legal because they had to reevaluate sentences. Here, these people were getting, life sentences for pot. And meanwhile, pot's now legal in the state of California recreationally. So I believe that's when this law was passed. And again, that's just a personal opinion, but I believe that's when this law was passed. So once this law was passed, they went ahead and started looking at all these cases. They went looking at other cases saying, look, should you really be behind bars for the rest of your life? Should you really be behind bars forever? It had to go for everybody. So then the Menendez brothers was like, hey, we don't belong in jail the rest of our life. So they wrote to the governor. Right now, as it stands, the not the public defender, DA's office has the ability to set them free, has the ability to resentence them, and a lot is falling on his hands. I mean, he's got the power right now. Sadly, this case became a political agenda back in 1996, and it could be that way again. If this guy, the DA, is getting a lot of pressure to let them out, they'll get out. If he's getting a lot of pressure to keep them in, they're going to stay in. The DA wants to make it out like he's got all this power, and he does, but it's still going to be a political agenda. No matter what, it's going to be a political agenda. And that's sad. I personally think he's leaning towards letting him out. I absolutely believe that that's what they're leaning towards. The way he said in the press release, it really made it sound like 35 years was more than enough, and he's done. Like, they should be out. One of the key components of this is the first jury that was a hung jury, and it should have been a hung jury, they couldn't decide. They didn't, they were given the choice of murder in the first, manslaughter, letting them go free. They had like 4 different choices, and they couldn't decide. They couldn't decide if it was murder, premeditated, not premeditated, if it was, manslaughter. So it ended up being a hung jury. The second trial, which came on the heels of O.J. Simpson getting released, getting found not guilty, here standing next to Lyle Menendez is the exact same attorney that helped OJ get off. Hey, Jiggy. So they were not exactly going to lose another case. So what they did with the jury is they never gave them a manslaughter option. Their only choices were murder 1, death penalty, or life without the possibility of parole, or let them go free. Well, you couldn't let them go free because everybody knew they actually did it. So if they actually did it, then what? So that's where we ended up getting a life without the possibility of parole, which is so whacked in itself. I understand human life means something. I understand that these 2, even if they were molested and whatever, they still shouldn't have, killed them. But what I found interesting, though, is was it Leslie Abrams or somebody said during the original trial that they could not find one person in Jose's life to say that he was a good guy, to say that he was a good person. That's really odd. Usually, you can find people to be character witnesses and say, you're a good person or you're, good this. No, not in Jose's life. They had absolutely nothing positive to say, which I think is fucked up. And to me, it speaks volumes. So Chris Cuomo interviewed them in 2017, which is what I have on the screen right now. So I want to watch some of it. I am going to have to stop it for fair use, but that's okay.
After 2 trials each, Lyle and Erik were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. But here we are 20 years later, and still one question remains. Why? Tonight, after nearly 2 decades, the older brother, Lyle Menendez, is going to speak. What happened that night? Why did they feel they needed to kill their parents? And the surprising reason why Lyle thinks his second trial was unjust.
And by the way, for Patreons, if you don't have Peacock, there's a special right now, or I guess it's been on for a while, called Menendez plus Menudo Backlash or something. I'm getting it from who I do my bootlegs from. I will record it and upload it to Patreon. So I just want to let Patreons know that. If you have Peacock, you can watch it. Most of us don't, though.
Joining me now on the phone from Mule Creek State Prison in California, Lyle Menendez. Mr. Menendez, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Chris.
So it has been over 20 years, and you have not done interviews about what happened that night, why it happened.
Let me also state this interview is from 2017. So this is not new. This is from 2017. And Cuomo discusses it on his, I'm going to play that clip after.
Happened, what you saw as a miscarriage of justice. Why speak now?
I think this, seeing so much coverage on TV that is really just focused on a very narrow narrative of killing your parents for money, and my family telling me that it's not really breaking through the media coverage at all. What was presented at trial and what really happened with your life, and you should say something. And they've been kind of saying that for a long time. And I don't know, we just decided to try to break through a little bit of the coverage and maybe get people to see a little bit more of what was really presented. And I just felt like maybe some of it had to come from me.
When you think about the biggest misconception that's out there about you, your brother, the case, what really happened, what do you think that is?
Well, I think that this was something that happened in Beverly Hills, and I get that the media picked up on it right away. When you just think of 2 rich kids and they killed their parents, and they're in Beverly Hills, and they spent a lot of money, and they had a lot of money, it seems like a very simple case. And then you have this long trial in which you have 2 separate juries, and sometimes I think that's lost, that there were 2 separate juries that viewed this case, and 18 of the 24 jurors determined that it was not a planned killing, and over half of the 2 juries determined that it was not a murder. So I just hope that a viewer would ask themselves, like, how could that be? How could you have 18 of 24 people think this is not planned, or half the jury think this is not murder? And what was this really, the motive of what happened, and why did it happen? There was a lot of talk about a spending spree, and these things play well on TV. But if they looked at the circumstances of my life at that time, that made no sense. It made no sense that I would kill my parents for money, or that anyone would kill their parents for money in the circumstances.
On a personal note, I don't know how I feel. There's a part of me that believes they probably were molested as children. My only vice, I guess, if they really did it because they were scared that they were going to reveal it or whatever, then why didn't they tell the cops that immediately? Why not tell them we shot them because it was their life or ours? They were 21 and 18 at the time, so it's not like they were 12. So it makes me wonder why certain things came out as they came out. Do I think that they were being molested at 16 and 17? I have a hard time believing that. I just do. Do I think it's possible it absolutely happened when they were young? Yeah, I do. But I'm stuck on why didn't they use that as a defense to begin with? But then again, you're right, it could be shame. There's just so many levels to this story.
Circumstances we were in.
Well, let's do it this way then. It all comes down to one night in your life and how that was presented by the prosecution and what you believe the truth of it was that either was or was not allowed to come out. So take us through it. Take us back to that night and what happened, in your opinion.
Well, I think I could take it just maybe a little bit briefly, a little farther back. I think it's important to know what was happening in my life at that time because the first thing that needed to be discussed was there a financial issue in this family that caused this? I don't think that was really an issue for the
Correct. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a setup, a premeditation that they had been thinking about 8 months prior. On the flip side, he had told a female cousin that it was happening to him when he was young. So that's why I do definitely believe that it happened when they were young. I just feel like at 17 years old, why are you still letting it happen kind of thing? I don't know. 17 just seems really old to me. But we don't know if that's true. We don't have that side of it. You know what I'm saying, Sly? We only have Erik and Lyle's side. Maybe Erik just didn't want to live in a dorm, and that's the excuse they gave. We don't know.
jury by the time they got midway through the trial at all. But in the public, I think it just remains there. To me, the idea that I would just suddenly just kill my parents for money made no sense, and that really had nothing to do with this whatsoever. What happened that weekend is my father was in a sexual relationship with my brother, unbeknownst to me. I had been molested as a child. I knew this about him. There was a sense in this family that my brother may have been molested when he was young also. My mother knew about it. She was informed early on, as far back as the early 70s. But I didn't think that anything had continued.
Part of the question in that early trial was, why didn't people know? Why weren't there marks? This was an older kid. This kid was 18 years old at the time. Why hadn't he told anybody? How do you answer those questions?
I would say that I think experts and the investigators that looked at this case from the defense side were actually expecting to find probably very little evidence of this, but there was actually quite a bit of evidence in this case. Luck or not, just it was there. An adult cousin of mine had been told by me when I was under 10 about what was happening with my father.
He and his dad had been touching each other, and he indicated that it was in his genital area.
She did go directly to my mother, and my mother did intervene.
When you say intervene, Lyle, just so people understand, what does that mean? What did your mother do at that time when you were a kid?
She went to my mother and had her come downstairs and told her what I had just told her.
No, the mom wasn't abusing them. Only the mom was an enabler. But I think a lot of people have a hard time because it was the 80s and it was two guys, not two girls. And it was a very different type of, it was just a different world back then.
About what was happening with my father. And my mother dragged me upstairs. Now, I don't know that my mother intervened, but the fact that it stopped after that, I like to believe that she intervened. I think my adult cousin certainly felt that. And it's kind of a shock that she even was willing to confront my mother, considering who my father was. I mean, you have to understand, it's difficult to get across who my father was. This was a very brutal man. And people knew some of it, but the outside world really wouldn't have seen a lot of it. And so people like this testified in my trial. So by the time I took the stand in the jury, the jury understood that I was dealing with a dangerous and brutal father.
All right, let's hold it right there. We need to take a commercial break. Stay tuned. We have more with Lyle Menendez.
As far as doing drama once a week, I thought about it. All right, hold on. Okay.
Week was the case of Lyle and Erik Menendez, the brothers. The two were convicted for the 1989 murder of their parents in Beverly Hills. But now the LA District Attorney is reviewing new evidence in the case.
The Menendez brothers captured the world's attention for decades, and the fascination with this case started back in the 80s.
On August 20th, 1989, Jose and Kitty Menendez were found shot and killed in their Beverly Hills mansion. Less than a year later, Lyle Menendez was arrested and Erik surrendered to Los Angeles police. It was believed that the boys killed their parents for their inheritance.
When the trial began for 4 years later in 1993, it was a media field day. The Menendez brothers emotionally described years of sexual abuse by their parents. They argued that they killed their parents in self-defense.
But the jury was deadlocked and it ended in a mistrial. In 1995, the second trial began.
And a year later, Lyle and Erik are convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
Now, fast forward to last year when the brothers filed a motion seeking a new hearing based on new evidence. And that brings us to today.
Joining us live is criminal defense attorney Mark Geragos, who's representing the brothers. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get straight into it, Mark. Take us back to when you first got involved in the case. What gave you confidence that this could all be turned around?
Well, about 2 years ago, I was talking with Cliff Gardner. Cliff is the appellate lawyer who was representing them back in 2005. And he had pointed out to me not only the letter that was found, there was a letter that Erik had written to his cousin Andy, and Andy tragically passed away about 20 years ago. The letter is dated about 8 months prior to the killings. So it shows, and he goes into horrible detail about the abuse that he's suffering at the hands of his father. So you combine that along with, there was a documentary that came out that also there was another victim, now one of the members of the boy band Menudo. And I thought, and as Cliff thought, boy, those, if anything ever called for a reexamination of this conviction, that would be it.
Rosie O'Donnell claims, like, I have another clip by her, but she's like, yeah, I called them. How are you calling people in prison? They can get phone calls? Because if they can, that's pretty wild.
There is a lot of curiosity when it comes to this new evidence coming to light, and obviously the DA playing a major role in all of this. Can you talk about the evidence and also what the DA's team is doing at this point in time?
Well, there's the DA, I thought, made a very brave move by coming out so close, if you will, to the election and saying he is reexamining it. I will tell you that for the last year and a half, we filed what's called a habeas corpus, which is a challenge to the conviction. About 3 months ago, because of a change in the law here in California, we also sent them over what's called a petition for resentencing. So we've got basically two tracks that we're going down. We're challenging the conviction. We're also saying, hey, Mr. DA, these two gentlemen, the brothers, are perfect candidates for resentencing. They've been in custody now for over 35 years. They've done tremendous work both on themselves and in the prison community. And if there was ever anybody who, under the current state of California law, should be released, these are the two who should be released.
So what are the possible outcomes then if there's these two tracks? I mean, does this go back to court for resentencing, or can the DA just decide, hey, let's just release them?
Everything has to be ultimately blessed by the judge, and it depends on which track we go down. But the DA could decide, and I think what the DA should decide is, look, they've been in custody 35 years. I've often said, if Erik's name was Erica, Lyle would have been a hero, and if they were the Menendez sisters, they would not be in custody. Society has evolved over the last 35 years. We now recognize what we could not accept back then. And if there is any justice, what I would argue that the DA should do is ask the judge to recall the sentence.
Now, here's a flip side of what I think, too. If you think back to the 80s and think back to, what's his name? Harvey Weinstein. All that was in the 80s. So, it seemed like any big guru in Hollywood felt that they could do whatever they want to anybody. So I kind of think like that when they talk about, oh, this didn't happen, but they were doing it to everybody. So that's where the flip side of it is. You think back to all the casting couches back then, and casting couches existed in the music industry. So, someone that big and powerful makes you wonder, wow, he probably did do it. And I'm sure he did it to more than just one, unfortunately.
Basically say, I'm going to recall the murder sentence. I'm going to recall the life without parole. I'm going to sentence you now to a manslaughter. And they've done the maximum amount of time on manslaughter.
Let's also talk about the reaction here. What are the brothers saying about this new hearing? How are they reacting? And how are family members taking all of this?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the reasons that we filed or gave them the draft petition for resentencing is 24 of the family members, both sides, Kitty's, Jose's, the siblings, nephews, nieces, cousins, all of them, save maybe one or two, 24, all signed a letter saying, hey, we want them out as well. That is basically unheard of. In my 40 years of practice, I've never had kind of a phalanx of victims who have all signed on to say, enough is enough, we want them out.
Wow. Well, a couple of days ago, you said there's a chance that they could be free before Thanksgiving. I mean, is that really possible?
It is, actually. The DA said that he planned on, I saw one of the interviews he did, said that Mr. Gascon said that he was, the buck would stop with him. He will make the decision. There is dissent in that office. There's still a couple of people around in that office who, want to try to uphold the conviction for reasons of their own. But I think that the right thing to do, that the fair thing and the just thing to do is get them home, and I'll have them over for Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, I guess only time will tell how this all plays out. Very fascinating to see all.
Because honestly, though, if you think about it, this was not murder in the first degree. This was manslaughter. The jury didn't have a choice in the second jury to give them manslaughter. So it's either let them walk free or sentence them to life in prison. But it really was a manslaughter charge. And why is it that we believe, and this is something that I'm really dead set on. Why do we believe all of these people coming out about P. Diddy and without any proof? And why do we believe all the people about Harvey Weinstein without, definitive proof? Why do we believe women but we don't believe these kids. Is it because they were rich? I mean, there are so many people coming out about P. Diddy. I'm like, there's no way that all of them are legit. There's no way that every single one of them are legit and never said anything prior. So I have a really hard time believing that that people want to say it's absolutely not possible that they were molested, because again, they said it before any man ever came out and said it. So it's whack to me that so many people want to say, oh, they were lying, but yet they believe all of these people that come out of nowhere. Yeah, they raped me 20 years ago. Okay, well, that was 20 years ago. Can we come down to the present? But why is it different for them? And that's something that I think people who don't think they should be out should really ask themselves. Like, this isn't right.
All of this. There's obviously a lot of buzz about the Netflix series going on. There is also a new documentary coming out this week. Do these projects help your case or do they hurt it?
Well,
Okay, before he answers that, let me just say, I watched the series Monsters. So when everybody kept talking about the Netflix series, I'm like, that was not pro Erik and Lyle. That was actually heavily against them. But then last night, I found there was this new documentary that was very positive for Erik and Lyle. So I think that's what everyone was referring to when they talked about the Netflix documentary. I don't think it was the Monsters one, because that one was like horrible.
I will tell you, I'm glad you asked that. There is almost a boomerang effect with the Monsters Ryan Murphy series. That came out, and Erik was very vocal specifically about the characterization or caricature of Lyle. And there has been a sea change in the age group, if you will, that is driving a reexamination of this. I can't tell you the number of kids or grandkids of people that I know that have been texting me saying, free the Menendezes. And what happened was the backlash against that Monster series, I think, inundated the DA's office and others. And I don't think anybody truly understood just how evolved we have become as a culture to understand now that male-on-male abuse can happen, that a father can abuse his sons. I mean, it was ridiculed back in the 90s. And the judge specifically, 8 days after OJ was acquitted and evidence started in this case, all of a sudden started changing the rulings and actually ruled, and not wrong necessarily back then in the 90s, that the idea of a battered woman syndrome or intimate partner violence did not apply to children. I mean, isn't that amazing now as you sit here in 2024 that a spouse had more protection back then than children did?
Oh, Mark, we have so much to get into. We could go all day long about this. It's so complex. But one last thing, you mentioned, the efforts, of people that are just like saying, hey, times have changed. Kim Kardashian is actually a huge name when it comes to that effort. I mean, what do you have to say about her and her words to the public?
Look, for whatever anybody ever says about Kim Kardashian, and we share an Armenian heritage, so she's an icon, not just in the community writ large, but in the Armenian community. She has taken this up, these kinds of convictions and injustices and excessive sentences as a cause, and she's been, I just think, tremendously effective and articulate on it. She has not, up until this case, waded into a situation where there was something that others have said it caused celeb. And I thought that was very brave, but she was taken down. She went to the Donovan State Prison. She saw the wonderful work that the brothers are doing with the Green Space Project down there. And she's been very vocal. And boy, it's hard to read her personal essay that she posted and not be moved incredibly by it. And I'm rooting for her taking the bar next year, and hopefully we'll try a case together at some point.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. Attorney for the Menendez brothers, Mark Geragos, thank you so much.
Kim Kardashian is taking the bar exam? Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Much for talking with us this morning. We appreciate you shedding some light on this case at this point in time.
My pleasure. Have me back whenever you want to discuss it more, and hopefully before Thanksgiving.
Hello, I'm Mark Brown.
Oh, I didn't know I was on mute. Everyone was talking about how Monsters was like so influential. I'm like, Monsters was against them. Monsters put them in the same light that everybody hated them and didn't believe them. You know, trying to make it. I mean, they did put a good thing on the attorney. I mean, the shrink. And if you're not really familiar with the case, this is what their demise was basically. Erik was seeing a psychiatrist. This psychiatrist was like such a piece of shit. He had a girlfriend, and the way they depicted it in the show is how it went down. He had this whacked out affair. I mean, they had an affair with this whacked out woman, and she ended up recording Erik and Lyle speaking to the shrink. So this way, the shrink had something on them. So then when she went to the police with it, look, I know who killed Jose and Kitty. Well, what do you mean you know who killed him? I have the two killers' confession. And then she went on trial. It was bad. But the fact that the shrink is the one that ultimately, you know, told on them, kind of changed everything in the way people spoke to shrinks, because I thought you could trust a shrink, but now you can't, because, you know, here's one that's having an affair. It was horrible. Horrible. So I have one more clip to show you guys. And for those of you that were asking about Rosie O'Donnell, this is going to tie it all together. Yeah, there is so much to this case. That's why I said I'm going to do it in pieces. Otherwise, it would be here for like 10 hours, which I don't get the views anymore to be here for 10 hours. So I'm trying to keep all lives 45 minutes to an hour. So we're going to watch this. But this ties how Rosie O'Donnell's involved and why she's involved.
Let's understand what changed and what could still change.
Well, what changed was, I think, when we discovered or were able to get the declaration of Roy Rosella, who was a member of Menudo, and he declared under penalty of perjury that he too was molested by Jose in the house, in the family house. You combine that with the letter that Erik had written prior to the killings, 8 months prior, to his cousin, who's now dead, Andy Cano. And we combined that together, and we filed back in May of last year what's called a writ of habeas corpus, which is a fancy legal term, Latin term, for basically set aside this conviction, bring me the body under the Latin. Also, since that time that we filed the habeas corpus, the changes in California law have allowed for what's called resentencing. And George Gascon, who's the DA here in Los Angeles, has a robust resentencing unit in which they take a look at sentences that were imposed years ago that were wildly disproportionate to what they might be today. And we are running down both those parallel tracks. We've supplied to them all kinds of information, what we call mitigation information, about them, and we're hoping now, and today was kind of an amazing day from our standpoint, that even 30 days before an election, and mind you, part of the argument that I've been making for a year and a half is that these guys were convicted because of DA electoral politics some 30 years ago. Mind you, the evidence portion of their second trial, where you mentioned they were convicted, started 8 days after the acquittal of O.J. Simpson, and the DA was on his heels at that point, and they needed a conviction.
Also, Mark, remind people, what was the difference between the first and second trial?
Well, first trial, 2 juries. Those juries heard the abuse evidence. Both juries, deliberating separately, the majority found not guilty of murder. They were hung juries between murder and manslaughter. Second time around, 8 days after the O.J. acquittal, they was 1 jury. They largely were prevented from presenting evidence of the abuse. And then what always has galled me is the DA got up in the closing argument in front of just 1 jury this time and argued that it was an abuse excuse, when he knew very well that he was the one who had convinced the judge to exclude the lion's share of the abuse evidence that the juries, 2 separate juries, had heard and hung on in the first time around.
Rosie, thank you for your patience. And I know you know all this already, but the audience has got to get up to speed.
Yes.
So first of all,
Sly Angel, was this video from today? Like, are they talking about a juror on Banfield tonight, or was this from yesterday? Hey, Amber, or was this from yesterday?
how was this news today met by the brothers?
Well, I called them after I spoke to Mark last night about doing this appearance, and I said, what's going on? And they said, they're hesitant to hope. After being in jail and prison for 35 years and being abused for his childhood up to that point, these men don't have a lot of bandwidth to hope for what exactly happened. And I want to thank the millennial culture of all these kids online who said, we learned about this in government class, we learned about this in civics, and how did this happen? And they started the Free the Menendez Brothers online, and it got people interested in the documentary about Roy Rosello, the Menudo member, and how he was savagely raped by Jose and was bleeding, and it was a very horrifying depiction of what happened to him and what happened to him ever since. And then with the Lyle letter that came out, it was like there's so much new evidence that they must take a look at the fact that in 1989, no one was ready to believe that fathers raped their sons, but they do, and it's scary.
Or they didn't want to, we were so different the way we were raised in terms of cultural awareness, on terms of stereotypes, and what is a man and how a man's supposed to behave. It was so different that millennials can't even picture it. They don't even see it in their own parents because we're all loving them so much to make up for how we were raised. But Rosie, there's always been this suspicion that if the Menendez brothers were the Menendez sisters, do you think this would have come out differently even back then?
Well, I think that if Eric was Erica, that Lyle would be a hero today, because a father viciously raping a child since they were 8 years old, all the way up until they were 17, and telling them they couldn't go live in a dorm because they had to stay home and service the father. If all of those facts were known to people, they would understand what happened. And sadly, I think, Chris, that unless you have experienced this kind of tortured existence of an incestuous family and all the lies that cover one another, unless you experience that, it's very hard to believe. Why didn't they just walk away? Well, they were 17 and 21. They were kids. They were children who had been abused the vast majority of their childhood in horrific ways, where push pins were in their penis. Like, it wasn't a casual father that came in drunk, and this was a sophisticated pedophile who was doing abusive terror to these children. How could that not change their psyche?
And also, there is a little bit, you know, I don't want to engage it too much, but some of the reaction online is that it's too much about the Netflix series. No, this is not newfound pushback for the brothers or the advocate community around them. I am not an advocate for the Menendez brothers, but years ago, okay, before the series, before any of this happened, I interviewed Lyle Menendez, and this was absolutely where they were, where his head was at that time. Here it is for the audience, just to show that this is not new.
What do you remember being told by your mother, by your father, their actions that made you feel that your life may be in danger?
Well, my father was telling me that a couple days before that I had made my decision in terms of deciding with Erik and wanting to threaten to expose him, and he was now forced to make his own decisions about what to do about that. And I asked him if that's a threat, and he said, "You take it for what it is." I know my father. I know what that means. He's basically suggesting that he isn't going to go through a child molestation trial. He would rather go through a murder trial than a child molestation trial.
Now, again, the point is, I may look like my own son, even from 7 years ago, but Lyle Menendez has been consistent in what he says happened all throughout. And Rosie, how does this impact you?
You know, I was a kid who grew up in a similar situation, not as terrifying or horrific, but definitely generational abuse and alcoholism in an Irish Catholic family. And there have been, you know, many people who have suffered as a result, including, you know, siblings and cousins. And so when I initially read the story, I was very drawn to it. And then I got a letter when my TV show was on in the 90s from Lyle. And he said, you know, I've heard you speak positively about us, and I hope this is not the reason that I think it is, that you can relate to the... And I, at that time, was in no way interested in exploring that subject in my own family and my own life. But through knowing Lyle and through being older and understanding your desire to help is bigger than your fear of being ostracized, and you do help, and it actually heals you. And so this has been very healing for me, and I've been in touch with the boys for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years, and I feel as though I know them very intimately. And if you thought that they were creative, horrible, gangsterish kind of guys, why have they had no charges in 34 years against them in the prison system? Why are they one of the most lauded...
And that brings me to another subject. People wonder why I don't think certain people deserve life in prison. Carly Gregg is one of them. Part of that reason is because if you've never had a history of violence, you could be young. But if you've never had a history of hurting anyone else, killing anyone else, then the odds of you going to prison for 35 years and coming out and becoming a criminal are slim to none. So that's where I think if someone is out on the streets killing multiple people, they deserve more time than somebody who shoots a parent. Because a person that shoots a parent, and that's the only violent stuff that they've ever done, definitely deserves a different type of sentence than someone who's murdering, you know, someone who goes and robs the corner store and kills the clerk for no apparent reason, or even someone like Wade Wilson, who just murders 2 women for absolutely no reason. I think they deserve a different type of sentence than a 14-year-old who shot her mom, who was a good student, who had a good life ahead of her. Same thing with these 2. Yes, they killed their parents brutally, but that's the only violent criminal they've ever been. I think it's a different type of sentence than armed robbery, per se, you know, where someone ended up dead. I don't know, just my thoughts.
prisoners in the California system. They are not the men that were described in the Ryan Murphy monsters. They are not that. That was inaccurate, wildly inaccurate, and I feel unjust in many ways. And so I'm so glad that this is happening now, right after that. I called them when that show aired, and I said, I encourage you to not watch it.
See what I mean? She's like, I called them. How are you calling prisoners? They can actually receive phone calls, or because you're Rosie O'Donnell, they can receive phone calls. She says that twice. I found that weird. I was like, really? You can just call them up? Be like, hey, what's up, guys? Okay.
Because you don't need to see yourself portrayed in a way that America viewed you in 1989. They were not rich kids out to get money from their father. They were abused kids who were sexually tortured for years, who felt they had no other choice.
Mark Geragos, resentencing. Politics of the moment versus politics then. Maybe politics helps leniency. I mean, there is a suggestion of that in the current disposition of the DA, who's, again, as you mentioned, in an election season. What do you think happens here?
Well, look, the resentencing is a movement in California. And resentencing is because we were also out in front during the 80s and the 90s here in California with the tough on crime, go warehouse them, throw away people for forever kind of a movement until we realized that was.
Yeah, I want to clear up. Eric's daughter is not actually his. It was his wife's daughter before they met. So just so everyone knows. And I have proof of that.
That was not a solution. Now, under resentencing and under the current statutory scheme, a judge has the ability to recall the sentence, literally say, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to take that life without parole. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to reduce this to a manslaughter on my own, and I'm going to sentence you to time served, because clearly, for having been in for 35 years with their credits, they've got 50 years, some odd years worth of credits. They never, under manslaughter, would have even come remotely close to that kind of time. That is also an option.
Well, let me tell you, we have been following it. I've been following it at 2 different stations. We'll keep following it because it is a really interesting test of how the justice system works, what goes into sentences, what goes into convictions, and what it can take to change it. So we will stay on it for the duration. You guys both have an open invitation here. As anything happens that is relevant, as has happened to this point, we're a call away to help you make your witness. Mark Geragos, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Rosie O'Donnell, always a pleasure.
Okay. I have something to show you guys. Bear with me. It's going to take me a minute to pull it up. And hopefully I won't get kicked off of YouTube for it. But at this rate, who cares? Hold on. Oh my God, what the hell? Here it is. All right, just bear with me a second. Hey, Grandma Rose. They should be free. They should have gotten manslaughter, not murder. They should absolutely be free.
In a kind of moral sense.
Would.
Bear with me. I should have looked at the timestamp. I was actually watching this uh before I went live. I'll upload it for Patreons.
Reverse field on.
But I want to show you guys a specific part with either Eric's wife or Lyle's wife.
I spoke to Erik at one point.
Erik doesn't have an actual
We all know
child.
that. But it's also like, you know, watch a sporting event, you don't know what's going to humiliate.
I'm going to show you that. It was his wife's child prior to them getting together.
Self-defense as involved.
I just don't remember the timestamp.
That it is shown in law school.
Yeah, no, it's not his. He talks about it in what I'm gonna play for you. I just gotta find it.
Prison.
Lyle.
And every time like I fast forward, here it is.
It got more intense.
All right, hopefully YouTube doesn't whack me for this.
And why?
All right, YouTube, be nice to me. Okay, we're gonna go for fair use here. So here we are. Fair use. You can't hit me, YouTube. Fair use stop. Fair use stop. Gotta have a fair use stop. Honestly, what I find interesting though is Erik was always the better looking one than Lyle, but in their old age, now that they're 50, Lyle is much better looking than Erik.
Was there?
See, that's the difference between now and then though. Now, I don't know if prisons you can touch at all. It might be all video. Where back then, if you went to actually visit someone, you could touch them. You know, you had to sit like across the table, but if you went to the vending machine together, I mean, you could physically touch them. I don't think you can anymore. This is where I'm confused. They keep showing Tammy and Lyle, but she's talking about loving Erik. I'm lost on that. I would like watched it twice before. I'm like, what? Why are you talking about Erik if you're married to Lyle? See, right there shows it. It was her young daughter. It wasn't his kid. All right, I'm wrong. Tammy's married to Erik? I thought Tammy was married to Lyle. I'm so confused. Okay, so Tammy's married to Erik. All right, I get confused. But she's been a pretty big advocate for him. See, this part, I don't remember this. And when I heard this, I was like, wow. And, you know, the one thing I want you guys to take away from what you're going to hear next, this is what I talk about when I say that the appeal boards have absolutely no pull unless there was something wrong with the actual trial. Even back then, this right here sums it up. And when I heard that, no, this is something totally different. When I first saw this, I was like, wow, now it makes sense. No, this isn't from Netflix. This is from somewhere else. Yeah, I got this message that said, you will, your video has been blocked uh, due to playing someone else's stream or something like that. But yeah, we're back. But I knew I was gonna get struck from playing this. Whatever. Typical YouTube. But I have this bootlegged. I don't even know where you can watch it, but it's from 2017. It's called The Menendez Murders, Erik Tells All. There's 6 episodes. But I got it from my bootleg channel. So I can watch all these. By the way, the substance was really good. Yes, that's what I'm saying. You can't do that anymore, Crazy Daisy. You used to be able to give your person a hug when you entered the visitation area. All right, so what I was about to play was a judge from the appeal board. The Supreme Court had made this argument that you can't have what's good for one and not for both, and that you can't change the law. So this judge ended up writing a letter to Tammy Menendez apologizing for not being able to, do anything about the circumstance. I know they post a letter, so hold on.
Went to the heart of what was.
So they actually post a letter. All right, so Judge Kaczynski says, and you don't succeed in a conviction, so you just change the rules, stating that because they lost in the OJ trial, now they're coming back and they just changed all the rules for the Menendez brothers, which is fucked up. And this one judge spoke out saying, look, you can't do that. You can't just change the rules because you want to get a conviction. And that's exactly what they did. So then he goes on to say, and they even changed the facts. So another DA says, a lot of the rulings from the first, do you find it a little distasteful that when the state doesn't succeed in convicting someone with one set of rules, so then they just automatically change the rules dramatically, which is exactly what they did. And there's 3 people on the appeal board that are arguing this. And the reason why that's so important is because even though this Judge Kaczynski knew that what happened was wrong, it was a complete injustice in the judicial system, it's everything that they stand against, he has no power to change it. In the end, he ended up writing Tammy a letter apologizing that I know that I spoke out and I stand by what I said, but I have no power to change it. I can't vacate their conviction by myself. I can't vacate it based on, the rules of justice. And that's what I try to say over and over. And people talk about appeals, people talk about appeal boards, and they're going to do this. And it was just like the perfect example of that just doesn't happen. They can only base it on what happened at the trial. They can't base it on anything else. You know what I can do, though? I can run this on Kick. I just thought of that. I could totally run this on Kick. It looks to me sort of like, gee, we didn't succeed in nailing these guys. This is what the judge said. Judge Kaczynski, it looks like to me sort of like, gee, we didn't succeed in nailing these guys, so we can't do it fair and square, so let's try to jimmy things up and see if we can get a conviction another way. And then the DA says, Your Honor, if the court is suggesting that Judge Weisberg try to jimmy the second trial, try to jury rig the case to obtain a conviction because you read articles about this in the paper, I just have to disagree with that suggestion. And that is exactly what happened. Jurors suggest retrial was rigged, and it was. Kozinski accuses judge of ensuring Menendez convictions, and that's exactly what happened. Hold on, I'm giving you guys like a play-by-play. I'm waiting for the letter. But this is like so important because Kozinski is talking about it and talking about the appeal. All right. So because he couldn't do anything, it said petitioners are not entitled to federal habeas relief. The judgment of the district court is accordingly affirmed because there was no error at the actual trial for them to do anything about. So the courts had to uphold their murder convictions because they had no choice. But they knew it was wrong. They knew it was shady. They knew it was wrong. And they knew that they literally changed the law. It's safe if you do it from a cell phone. You want to use you have to X out a lot of screens before you get there. And then if you use a computer, I don't seem to have any issues, but I would definitely use, like, I hope you have a malware, blocker and stuff. But honestly, I've never had a problem with them. You can use a VPN. Either way, if you're on a computer, I honestly have never used a VPN. Not for this. I used to use a VPN, but I stopped using it. But it's m4uhd.tv. I don't know where it is. Maybe I'll do that though. Maybe I'll run these series on Kick since I can't do it here. But I don't even know why YouTube is like freaking out. It's like from 2017. It's old. But yeah, this one's called, there's so much stuff on this case. Like literally so much. But I do think they need to get released. But I'm going to get off now because I'm getting tired and I still got candles to do. Don't forget, order your candles, energycandles.com. Check out the new website. Get your candles. I'm doing a big social media push soon. I'm making Halloween stuff, Halloween wax melts, and making more chicken legs. And you guys will see, we got lots of good stuff. And I'm making a Halloween series, Halloween candle series, which I try to get the pictures done today, but I suck. So we're going to try again tomorrow, although I have a doctor's appointment. And then Thursday, the 10th, that's the big one. If I get past that, we're good. I've been like stressing out until we hit Thursday. Once Thursday happens and we know that I'm all good, I'll feel a lot better. So, other than that, it's been like a rocky road. But yeah, if you guys aren't on Kick, definitely go to Kick, Perplex QT, and I will run some of these on Kick. Not right now, but tomorrow, maybe. I don't know. We'll figure it out. All right. I got a doctor's appointment in the morning, early afternoon. Kids are off from school. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a wonderful night. Peace out. And this was only part one. There's going to be many more parts.